okay, this is project 2-4. Remember to log into MyWillMU. Click on to log into Canvas. Once you're in Canvas, make sure you use the dashboard to go directly into this course and use this link, McGraw-Hill SimNet. And once you're over there in that view, click on Projects and then go directly into 2-4. And then you're going to click on this here, and that will populate down in your window, and you'll click on it to populate and click on Enable Editing. Immediately go to File, Save As, Browse. Then you want to click on your location. Downloads would work. You want to backspace this all out, and you want to name it as Excel Project 2.4, and then click on Save. Now I already saved mine, so let me close this one out. Okay, so now if we move on to number 2, there's two things we're going to do. We have a table of information. Now, whenever you click on a cell, we know the cell name based on what's grayed out, and it's up here in the name box. So the active cell right now is B1. Now, you can use these inside a formula or function, which I'm going to explain to you, or you could name it yourself and type out a name. So that's the two things we're going to do, and it's called naming a range or naming a cell. So if I was to highlight this range here, that would be B1 to F2. You can enter that into a formula or a function, or you could highlight this and just name this entire range as H rates, which we're going to do now. So you highlight the range and you go up here into the name box and you type it out, H_rates. When you're done typing, you must press enter for it to accept the change. So now whenever I highlight this range, that name appears up here in the name box. So the other thing we're going to do is we're also going to name these cell locations. Instead of this being as B6, we're going to now name it as candy sales. So we're going to let it self-generate. So how we do that is we're just going to highlight with our white mouse pointer. We're going to go over here and select, and make sure you're on your Formulas tab, Create from Selection, and it's already recognizing how to name that cell based on what's sitting here in the left column. So we don't have to do anything here, we just select OK. Now you don't see anything except for if we go up here to the Name Manager, you want to verify that you've done everything correctly. Now here's the H rates, this is the one you just named. And how we identify this is saying tables, exclamation point. That means we're going to this worksheet name, and this name refers to the range running from B1 to F2. Now if you look at the rest of these, now this would be B6 on a tables worksheet. That particular location is now named Candy Sales. So it eliminates having to type out all this in a formula. Now you can just refer to it by its name because we named that range or we named that cell. So if there's anything that you have an overabundance, so if you did it too many times, just highlight things and delete it out, or you can delete them all out and start over. But the goal is you're going to make sure that when you highlight this range, you type it up here, and then when you go to name this range, you're going to click on Create from Selection. Okay, so that's all of number 2 and 3. So now we're actually going to use these tables. So let's take a look at our first worksheet, and this is commissions. Now commissions, the way you have to look at this, anytime you have data that's typed in, you always need to identify it, just like the IRS. IRS will have your social security number, your first name, last name, street address, but they have to make sure that they head that column up with a name. So these are column titles, column headers. There's several ways to identify that. Now when you go down to a row, that becomes a record of information. So each individual in the IRS system would be a record of information. So this one would be the first employee, and this is the branch they work at, and this is their commissions. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enter a function to look up at this table. These are going to be our lookup points. So it's going to go to the table and it's going to look for 15,000. When it finds it, it's going to count 1, 2 and return this bonus percentage, and it will self-populate here. Now it's going to count to 2 because we're actually going to give it that number 2. So let's go ahead and start typing it out and develop it. So if you type equals, because any formula function must start with an equal sign. So if you type equals and you start typing out the word H, look, you see there's the function down below, and I'm going to double click it to go into function mode. Now the first thing it's saying, okay, well, what's your lookup value? Well, we want to look up this 15,000. So it's going to self-populate with that location. It knows where to go grab its number, comma, and then the next thing it's asking us, okay, well, where do we go? Well, we named that range. So we're just going to start typing H, and you can see with the little yellow tag, it automatically comes up. We can double click and it will self-populate, comma, and we type the number 2 to say, okay, when you go to this table and you find this number, I want you to count 2, and whatever's sitting in that second position, I want you to return that number. So I'm going to end it with a parenthesis, and then press enter, and you can see the rate that came back. Now it didn't come back as a percentage just because we did not format that as a percent style yet. It comes back as a decimal. So to another way that if you double click, you can see here's the actual function. If you press enter, it returns the value. So we used a method we were just typing it out, but you can also go over here to this f of x, which will open up this functions argument dialog box. Some people prefer to use this because as you're clicking it out of these different fields, when you're in a field, it will give you a full explanation as to what to do. And you'll see that it grabs the value. There's no error messages over here. And then you can see down here it's recognizing, as I click down, you can see it's recognizing all the numbers within that range. And if I click down here, it knows, okay, once I find that number, I'm going to count to 2, and then I'm going to return the value. And you can see the value is returning. There's no error. But the nice thing, it's always explaining to you. And if you look down here, we didn't fill anything in this last argument, only because it says if you're looking for something that's a close match, and if you type true or something that's omitted, then it's a default. It knows to look for the closest. If we wanted an exact match, we would have to type out our word false. So let me select OK. Now the next goal would be to take our mouse pointer over top of this green square, and we're going to drag it down to copy that down. Now when you double click on this next one, you can see now it's going to look up the 12,000 because it now knows to go to E6. And then if we click on this one, it knows to go to E7. Now it knows to go to E8. So when we copy the formula down, it counts up relative to its row. So now that we have those decimal values, we're going to click back on the Home tab, and we're going to highlight with our white mouse pointer. We're going to drag down to the last row, and we're going to apply the percentage style. And then we want to make sure it's at 3%. We want to increase those decimal places 2 times. So we click 1, 2. And now instead of it rounding up to 3, it's 2.5%, which actually represents what's on this table. So that right there was a horizontal lookup. So, and again, it's horizontal because it's going in this direction to look up your lookup point, and then it's going to count whatever number you give it, and when it stops at that point, it'll return that value, which we only have 2. Now in the real world, your tables will be much larger. Okay, so let's go back here. Now we have this time, so this was a function, it's predefined. All we have to do is fill things in the parentheses, and it will know how to perform as long as you follow the rules. And here are the rules right here. It explains to you, or you can open this up and you just follow the rules as to what you need to fill into those different fields. Okay, so now here this is a formula, and that's acting as if you're using a calculator, but instead calculators we always end with equals. This time we're going to start with an equal. So if we type in equals, it means okay, we're going to perform some kind of calculation. Now when you're reading number 7, it's going to let you know that it wants you to take this commissions rate, and we're going to add it to, we have to force order of operations, so we need some parentheses. It wants us to take this and we want to multiply it by this, and I'm just using a point and click method instead of typing those cell locations out, and then end parentheses. So what we're saying is we want to make sure that you multiply this. Once you get your value, then you're going to add it to E5. So I'm going to use the check mark to enter it. You can use your enter key on the keyboard, or you can use the check mark, and it returns its value. Once you have that completed, you can go ahead and convert your mouse pointer over the green square, you can drag it down to the bottom and it will copy that formula down. And if you double click, you can see now it's selecting the next row down, and then so forth and so on. So it's just counting up as you copy your formula down. Okay, so now number 8. So the next thing we're going to do with number 8, and let me just go ahead and minimize this a little bit. And the nice thing you can see when you're interacting with these spreadsheets, they already have all the work done for you. They've created your title, your subtitle, your style. They created all the column titles to identify what information is below in that column. And they made another little table here. Now this table here, so this table down below, it's branch totals. We are going to create sum ifs for these different locations. Now this sum if function, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're going to say you're going to look up in this range, and if it is this word, then we want you to go over and grab these values and sum them and return it to us. So let's go ahead and set that up. So let me blow it up so you can see what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one at a time and type equals sum if, and I see it down below, double click on it, and it's telling me the first range. Well, I'm saying, okay, well the first range is I want you to look at all this stuff right here. Okay, now once you look at that stuff, comma, if it's this word, now we don't have to type that word out. We're just saying, okay, go over to this location and grab the word, comma. If it meets that criteria, then I want you to go over here and I want you to grab the number, add those up, and return my value. Now, let's look at it again. So the nice thing is that when, let me press escape, when you're setting these up, it's color coded so you can identify with the parts of your formula. So you can see the first part, it's this range to see if it can find the word, but it doesn't know the word till you go ahead and set that as your second part of your argument. Here's the word, and then the third part of your argument is, okay, well once it meets the criteria, where do I go grab my number so I can start adding these numbers up so I can return the value. Now here's the other key point, a new concept that's being included, and this is called absolute cell referencing. Now I'm going to have to stop here because I only get 15 minutes for free, so let me finish with this concept and then we'll move on to part 2. So this is all number 8 that we're working on. So the last concept I need to make you understand that we're going to copy this formula down so we can use it for this word and this word too. Now when we copy down, we want to make sure that we copy that we don't set up our ranges to start skipping cells and including empty cells in their range. So you don't want the ranges to go out of whack. So let me pull this back up. So how do we do that? So if we're going to use the copy handle, how do we avoid that counting up? And let me blow this up so I can show you what I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about is we don't want this to count up to a 6, and we don't want this to count up to a 15. However, we do want this to count up because when we copy it down, we wanted to go over to C19 and grab the next word. And again, this range, if you can see the ranges here, 5 to 14, 5 to 14, they're consistent. Well, how do you lock them in? Well, this is called absolute cell referencing. You can use the shortcut button, which is function in the very top F4, and it automatically does it, or you can just manually type in those dollar symbols before the letter and before the number. And it must be applied to all this stuff, except for that. That's the only thing that you're going to leave it off. And whenever you have the dollar symbols, it's called absolute cell referencing, which it will lock it in. So when I drag this down, you'll see my numbers are correct. And let me turn this on to show you. And what happened, let me open it up. You could see the 5 never changed, the 14 never changed. So when it looks in this range, the range from row 5 to 14 never changes because you don't want to skip cells and include empty cells. But it does now refer to the next word and to the next word. So let me turn that back off. So the last step for this, before I move on to the next video, it's going to ask you to apply, I do believe it's, when you read your set of instructions, I think it's the currency style. Yeah, it's the currency style. So we're going to apply currency style, and then we're going to go up here and we're going to auto sum and then check mark, and that's it. On to the next video.